Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And we are here with a recap of NBC's hit show, This Is Us. This is one of my favorite shows, guys. I mean, this show has you all over the place with your emotions. And I didn't recap it last season. This is season 5. Season 4, they kind of like strayed away from where they were in the first 3 seasons. And so I just wasn't, really tuned in. I think I may have done like 2 or 3 recaps in the beginning. But then after episode 4, I don't think I did any more recaps, and I wasn't really watching faithfully. But I'm back on board, and so a lot of the series have been delayed due to COVID, and so we can expect to see, as new shows come back on air, that they're going to be focusing on COVID. They're going to be focusing on Black Lives Matter, and This Is Us is definitely going in that direction. And so if you follow the show, each season starts on their birthday. So for those of you who are not familiar with the show and just watching this recap, the show started out with this couple, and the wife goes into labor. She has triplets, but one of the triplets dies. And at the same time, there is a Black couple who give birth to their baby, but the mother dies. They are poor. They're dealing with drug addiction. And so the father takes the baby and abandons the baby at a fire station. The baby is taken to the nursery. And so as the white couple is dealing with the loss of one of their children, they come up with the idea, or the husband comes up with the idea, that maybe they lost their baby, whose name was Kyle, that they lost Kyle so that they could prepare or provide a home to this little Black baby who turns out to be named Randall. And so it's the kid, and I want to say, don't quote me, but I also think that the father, who's the character's name is Jack, I think it's also Jack's birthday, and then the triplets are born on that same day. So the first episode of every season is the triplets' birthday. And Jack has actually passed, and they do a lot of flashbacks in the show, which keeps that actor on the show, but in actuality, he actually passed when the kids were younger. And so it's now the kids' 40th birthday. They turned 40, and it's Kate, Kevin, and Randall. And so the show opens up with Kevin, and remember, Kate had the friend from her support group named Madison, and so Kate deals with obesity. Her husband Toby also was dealing with weight issues. Madison, I think, was bulimic or something, because she's a small girl. But anyway, her and Kevin ended up sleeping together, and Madison is now pregnant, and she's expecting twins, we learn later in the show. And so she, lets Kevin know that she's pregnant. And also in the season finale last year, Kevin and Randall, they fell out during the season over the mom, Rebecca, has the onset of Alzheimer's. And Kevin didn't want to put her in any type of treatment facility. He wants her to just enjoy, the last quality of her life, surrounded by family, friends, living in her own home, being supported by them. But Randall wants to put Rebecca in a pilot program for people with Alzheimer's, or the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. And so there's a lot of tension through last season that's dealing with how they're going to deal with Rebecca's issues. And so Madison and Kevin, they decide to go over to Kate's house to, give them the good news. And so when they arrive and Kevin starts telling Toby, that they're pregnant, Kate is standing there in shock. Like, first of all, when did y'all sleep together? When did y'all become a couple? Like, what is going on? But of course, Toby is elated and he's happy. And, and because COVID, is the order of the day, we get to see how families react. And so, of course, they don't let Kevin and Madison into the house because they have their baby and they don't want to expose him. And then they sort of make Kevin and Madison stay at the end of the driveway as they stand, on the stoop of the house. And so it was really funny because, like, my mom doesn't want anybody coming to her house. My daughter and her family was visiting from California, and they went to my mom's house because they were going to use her car while they were here. And so, my mom was basically like, here are the keys, enjoy your visit. And so my daughter was really hurt because she was like, how can my grandmother treat me like this? She's never met my baby before, because at the time my granddaughter was like 3 months old, my grandson about 15 months old. And so my daughter was really hurt, but I was trying to explain to her, my mom is in her 80s. She has a lot of medical problems. She is in that very, very high risk group. And so you got to understand. And so my daughter was like, okay, so she quarantined for 14 days. And then she went to visit my mom with the kids. Well, by then her husband had went back to California. And so when it was time for them to leave, they went to take the car back, and this was 6 or 7 weeks later because she was here most of the summer. So they go to take the car back, and my mom wouldn't even come down and open the door. I told them to put the keys in the mailbox because she knew that they had been out, hanging out with their friends and doing stuff with them. And so she was like, she wasn't going to compromise herself. And so it was hurtful in one aspect, but understandable in another. So just seeing how they're going to try and play this out through the season is going to be interesting, because I think you get to a part, like in the beginning, everybody was about social distancing and wearing their mask. And now here we are, 8 months later, and people are kind of like, child, please, I am over this. And I know personally, I am always going somewhere, get halfway to my destination, and like, God dog it, I don't have a mask. So I have to turn around, come back home, get a mask, and go to where I'm going. And I thought it was interesting that when I was visiting my daughter in California last month, that their grocery store chain, Safeway, they actually have like a dispenser for masks. So if you get to the store and you realize you don't have your mask, there's this dispenser there. So like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how long throughout the season they're going to be able to hold up this whole COVID, being COVID responsible. And so as, they get through giving their air hugs and everything and congratulating each other, the camera pans over to the creepy next door neighbor, you guys know, who is in love with him some Kate. And I thought Kate was going to end up leaving Toby for this man who has his own medical issues. And so, Kate is always looking for somebody to be codependent with her. And I thought that guy was going to do the trick. And so they're back at Madison's place, and Kevin and Madison are talking, and he wants Madison to go back to wherever he lives at. Is it LA? Because, Kevin is an actor. But anyway, Madison says, no, she can't leave. She wants to stay where she's at. And so she invites Kevin to stay with her. And she starts talking about this Japanese themed bedroom that she has. And so Kevin is like, okay. And then we can tell that Kevin is starting to like Madison. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how far their relationship goes. Then we move over to Randall, and so Beth can't wait to call and tell Kate that Tom Hanks has tested positive for COVID, because that's one of her favorite actors. And so they get on the phone, and Kate tells Beth, about Madison. And then Randall said that Madison is the only friend that any of them have. So when Beth was relaying the message to him, he got to thinking, like, none of us really have any friends, like these triplets or these twins and single person are off the chain. They all have their own emotional issues. So then Randall congratulates Kevin, and through a text message, and Kevin wants to write back this longer reply, kind of apologizing for how things ended the last time they saw each other. But when he finally sends the text, we see that all he did was say congratulations, and he didn't go into all he said was thank you or thanks. He didn't go into what he wanted to actually reply to Randall. So Randall gets an alert on his phone about George Floyd. And you guys know that George Floyd is the black man that was killed in Minneapolis back in May. And so they're going to cover, the Black Lives Matter protests. So later that night, Randall and Beth are in bed together, and they're watching, the news coverage of the protests. And they're just in shock, that this police officer kneeled on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. And so we know just by Randall's body language that this whole George Floyd thing, the whole Black Lives movement, is going to really, weigh heavily on him. And we don't know, which way he's going to go, how he's going to be able to deal with it. Then we have another scene where Randall is doing a Zoom therapy session with his counselor. And you guys know Randall is finally convinced himself to go to therapy, but the counselor is a white woman. So Randall, is telling her, how bad things are due to COVID, and how Beth's studio is suffering badly, and he can't wait till everything gets back open, sort of like the rest of us. And so Randall is becoming obsessed with the riots and all the coverage that's going on. So then we have a scene where Kate texts pictures of Jack and asks what Black causes can they donate to show support. And so Tess wants to know if they can change the channel, because I think in this scene they were all sitting on the sofa. It's the next day, they're on the sofa and they're watching all of this coverage. And so Tess says she's sick of it, she's over it, she wants to change the channel. So they tell Annie that she can change the channel, and so Annie chooses to watch the Family Feud. Then we have a scene with Madison and Kevin, and they're also watching the Family Feud, and he's sharing with her, how that was one of their favorite TV shows growing up and how the family used to watch it together. And so Madison suggests that they take an RV to go see Rebecca, and the family meet at the cabin, for their birthdays, because they always get together to celebrate their birthdays. And so I think Kevin, like I said, is falling in love with Madison. Maybe it's because he's 40, he's not married, he doesn't have a family, that, he's starting to think that time is running out, and this is, what he needs to be doing at this stage in his life. We go back to Beth and Randall's, and Beth, wakes up the following morning and finds that Randall is already up working. And so he assures her that he's okay, and that, his shakes are gone, and he's seeing the therapist twice a week. Don't worry about him, he's going to be okay. And so Beth, basically lets him know, well, that's good to know, because I need some sex. Like, it's been a while, it's been months, we need to get busy, we need to do something. And so Randall was like, well, yeah, I understand, but I really need to take a rain check on that. And I'm like, oh my God, like, don't let them go through their marital issues again. So Beth keeps trying to convince him, to go to the cabin and join the rest of the family, to celebrate their birthdays. But Randall, is doubting the accuracy of the story of how he was found. And so he doesn't want to partake in the birthday celebration because he feels it's all a farce. And, he really needs to find out who he is, where he comes from, and all of that good stuff. So at this point, we have a flashback to William. You guys know that William is Randall's biological father. And in these flashback scenes that we're going to get over the rest of this episode, as well as part 2, which was episode 2 that also came on last night, and I'll do it in a separate recap, we find out, what happened to Laurel, who is Randall's biological mother. And so in the flashback scenes that we get with William and Laurel, it'll be of Laurel alive and how they spent the day, and then it'll go to when Laurel gives birth to Randall and what happens after that. let me back up. They have this scene where it's the two couples together, and they're talking and laughing and talking about demonstrations and everything, and Laurel talking about her drug addiction, and William seems to be really happy. And then in that scene, we actually see where William is holding Randall. Randall is crying out, and Laurel is in the bed. And William is like trying to talk to her and calm down the baby, and then he kind of like turns Laurel over, and we can see that she's really out of it. She's not conscious, she's not doing well. And so at the same time, as he's having these flashbacks, we have a scene where he takes the baby and he runs out into the stairwell of the apartment building, and he's crying for help, asking somebody to help him. So at the same time that William is crying for help in the hallway, we get the original scenes from season 1, episode 1, of Rebecca and Jack getting prepared to head to the hospital. Now the focus of the show, it turns to Rebecca, and we find out what's going on in her life. And so Rebecca is picking apples, at the cabin, and Miguel is there, comes out talking to her and everything, and they can't believe, that the kids are going to be 40, and that Randall, has opted not to come and be a part of the celebration. And so inside, Kate and Toby, they're talking about the discord between Kevin and Randall and how it's not good. And, she wants to do a 3-way call so that they all can talk and wish each other a happy birthday. So Rebecca is feeling much better and wants to cook everyone's favorite dinner or their favorite dish, whether it's a staple food or it's a dessert. And she wants to do it all from scratch. I think she was talking about lasagna, just to show them that she's doing much better. So while Kevin was in the shower, Madison fell over the suitcases, and now she's worried something has happened to the babies because she can't feel them moving. And so she wants to go to the hospital but not tell anyone, what's happened. So they end up sneaking out the house and going to the hospital. So we get another flashback scene to William, and now the EMTs are at the apartment and they're trying to revive Laurel. So he has a flashback to when they were laying in bed together and talking about their plans for the future, and she was going to try for an assistant manager position at her job, and she wanted to move into a bigger apartment that was upstairs in the same building they lived in. And she was saying it had 2 bedrooms. The room that would be the baby's nursery would have a window, and how she wanted the baby to wake up in the morning and be able to look out and see the sun and all that. And so Laurel took the narcotics. Well, I probably shouldn't tell this part of it, but she goes into labor and actually ends up having the baby in their apartment. So the paramedics try to revive her, but they can't. And they say that they have to call DCF, because of the baby and the fact that, she's had this drug overdose. And so William runs out of the apartment with Randall after hearing, that they're going to call DCF. And so the scene then goes to Rebecca and Jack, and they're headed to the hospital while William is on the bus with the baby. And then we go back to real time, and Tess is upset, that they can't go to the cabin because Kevin and Randall are fighting, and Randall goes outside, because he don't want to argue with them. And so Tess and Beth look at each other, and they think that, he may be, I guess they were thinking that he was taking like antidepressants or something, and he may have taken too many, but he definitely was acting different, and they are concerned, about how, he's not as depressed as he normally is, or he's not as anxious and overreacting or, having an anxiety attack or anything. So back at the cabin, Rebecca wants to go to the store, to get a birthday cake for the kids, and she wants to go alone. And so after she leaves, Ramona says that she needs to maintain, as much independence as possible, and then leaves to follow her. Now, this whole scene with Rebecca going to get the cake was very confusing to me, because if you guys remember, when they first found out that Rebecca was having, these issues with remembering things, it was because they were at Randall's house, and I thought it was Thanksgiving or some holiday, and Rebecca had left to go get this cake, and she ended up at this restaurant, and then she lost her memory and all of this stuff. So they were playing that same scene, and so I was so confused. And then I started remembering in that past episode, when the police brought her home, they didn't take her back to Randall's house. They took her to the cabin. And so it was just, I was so lost and confused. I was like, maybe I need to go back and revisit season 3 and season 4. And then I was thinking I didn't even keep up with season 4 that much. And so the explanation probably was in there somewhere. So then they go over to the hospital, and Madison is concerned, you know, that it's taken the doctor so long. And then finally the doctor comes in and does a sonogram, and she's only getting 1 heartbeat, you know, because they had learned that they were having the twins. And so she wants to do a vaginal ultrasound, which is going to, you know, keep them at the hospital a little while longer. So then we go to another flashback scene with William, and he drops the baby off at the fire station. And so he has another moment where he's reflecting over, you know, I guess the last 24 hours with Laurel. And, you know, Laurel is upset that she didn't get the assignment, didn't get the assistant manager's job. And their friends have been arrested for passing out flyers, you know, with this protest that's going on. And so Laurel mentions that she will have to deliver the baby naturally with no medication due to her past drug addiction. Then we get back into current time, and Malik, who is the adopted daughter, Randall and Beth's adopted daughter, whose name has just escaped me, but I'll put it in the bottom here. And so he comes over and he stops by, you know, and Randall's sitting outside. And he asks Randall, you know, if he's okay. And Randall says, he asks Randall if he's okay. And, you know, Randall tell him not really. And so then Malik was like, well, you know, you have to check on your strong friends, because, you know, they're usually the ones that's suffering the most, but nobody really pays attention. And then Randall reminds him that, you know, I'm not your friend. I am the father of your girlfriend. And so then he asks Malik, you know, how is him and his family dealing, you know, with the protests and, you know, everything that's going on in the news. And Malik tells him that, you know, his family has been protesting, and that, you know, he had some pictures he was going to share with Randall of them out, you know, doing their part. And then Randall asks him, you know, what did he think about the video? And he says that each time that there's a police shooting, him and his dad actually go for a walk, and they talk about, you know, how they're feeling about what's going on, you know, the impact that it's having on them. So they're like checking in on each other's mental health, which I thought was a really good idea, because I see so many people, you know, just talking, like really negative and overwhelmed about everything that's going on. And I always wonder, and I even post on my social media sometimes, like, is anybody thinking about the kids, how this is impacting the kids? You know, can parents and adults, can we afford, you know, to be so negative and overwhelmed and feeling like, you know, there's nothing that we can do, like this is a hopeless situation? You know, like, how are we projecting our energy onto the kids? And who's making sure that the kids are okay? So I'm really happy that they worked that into this season, you know, if this is what they're going to be covering. So as Malik goes into the house, Randall gets a text from Kate, you know, basically letting him know that Rebecca is lost and she doesn't know what to do. Another flashback scene comes, and we have Rebecca and Jack at the hospital, and Jack forgot to bring the radio, so he runs out to find one. And meanwhile, Rebecca talks to the nurse that comes in about, you know, how men aren't allowed to express emotions, and then in moments like this, they often feel helpless and don't know how to help their mate. And so Rebecca wonders if they will have all boys, and will the boys be just like Jack? And then in the juxtaposition, we go back to the hospital with Kevin and Madison, and he's trying to assure Madison, you know, that the babies will be fine and they will be great parents. And then he suggests that they get married, and she says yes. So the nurse returns, or the doctor returns and does the ultrasound, and we find out that both of the babies are doing fine, which is great. So then Kevin and Madison are leaving the hospital, and she says that she doesn't see Kevin's broken parts, as he calls them, you know, that she feels that, you know, we all have flaws, and that, you know, the things that Kevin sees as a negative are just parts of him, and she thinks that he's amazing overall. And then she offers to free him of his Jerry Maguire proposal. And so Kevin doesn't want to take back the proposal, and so they go back and forth. And so I guess they're officially engaged now. We get another flashback, and Laurel is doubting, you know, that she will be a good mother. She tells William, you know, to promise that he'll never fail her, that he'll always be there. We go back to the scene from 1 or 2 seasons ago where Rebecca is at the restaurant and she's freaking out because she doesn't know what happened to her phone. And then William goes to the hospital in a flashback scene, and he's at the nursery when Jack runs by with the radio. And so even though it was Rebecca that found William and knew that William was Randall's father all this time, Jack and William had actually interacted with each other non-verbally, but they were in the same place at the same time several times and didn't even recognize or know that their lives would be intertwined or connected down the road. And so overall, I thought this was a really great episode, a really great season opener. I hope that they can keep the same energy and that they get back to what made us fall in love with the show during season 1 and season 2. And so I am here for it, and I hope you guys are too, and stay tuned because I am also going to do a recap this evening of episode 2. There were 2 episodes last night because, as you guys know, next Tuesday is election day, and so everything's going to be canceled, okay? Because everything is going to be focused on the election. All news coverage is probably going to take over every television station, on air, social media. And as a matter of fact, if you haven't voted, go vote. If you're like me and plan on voting on election day, because I reserve the right to change my mind up to 6:59 p.m. Okay, you know, be safe and just try to find things to do to keep your mind off of all the negativity that is going to be going on, all the media suspense and hoopla. Y'all know it is going to be a hot ass mess. Okay, so take care. Leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye bye.